Very welcome to the Straight Talking podcast today. I'm delighted to announce that we Philly McMahon to talk to us today. Philly McMahon has done a TED Talk. He's written a book, and he's won a couple of medals playing Gaelic football.
Yeah.
Very welcome, Philly.
Thanks
How's things? No worries, man. I suppose I'm going to ask you a few things. I know a good few people from Bali Moon, and I know you. I know you a good while now, and you're I'd call you a friend, and I have a number of friends and people from the Bali Moon area that are staunch. You know what I mean? Staunch, and they're not like activists, like Instagram, like they do proper gear on the ground, like Dean Scurry, Owen Roddy, yourself, you know. What was it like growing up in Bali Moon? And a good few people that listen to this are American. Okay. So a good few of our listeners are American. So Bali Moon is like a project. That's what they call it in America. So what was it like growing up your early youth?
Yeah, so just to, I suppose, give those who don't know about Bali Moon kind of a better understanding of the community. It was developed because the overcrowded tenements in the inner city in the 70s, late 70s, kind of crossing over into the 80s, and it was kind of this euphoria complex that would solve the housing crisis, so that the tenements in the inner city were overcrowded, and the government said, you know what, this is going to be the solution. Let's build a big massive complex that was replicated from an estate in Germany, and it would basically accommodate 20,000 people. Unfortunately, it was a beautiful community when it was originally built, but unfortunately the amenities didn't match the kind of the accommodation. There was people that were very vulnerable, very uneducated, and it was kind of the mostly kind of lower class citizens, basically. Yes. You know, working class people. Kind of there would be middle class people in it, but it was kind of the one. You could nearly say the government said, let's get all these working class people and put them in this community, like, you know, which in hindsight you can look back and you could say that there was going to be huge issues because of that. And then the problem that came next was when it was built, the heroin epidemic hit the country, and it was a very lucrative business, being a heroin dealer and a drug dealer, any drug dealer in Bali Moon, because you weren't in this dispersed community. Everybody was on top of each other, and there was ways where people could do drugs and hide it. Yeah. But also that you had a huge amount of trauma in this community, a huge amount of issues, so that, you know, I don't think the drug dealers realised, but that's probably why communities that are lower to working class struggle with drugs, because these people use drugs to overcome any psychological pain.
Yes.
So obviously then with drugs came crime and a lot of violence, and it got to the point then, I would say kind of early 90s, late 80s, where the people of the community decided to do vigilante marches to get the drug dealers out of the community, out of flats. Back then also you would have had the paramilitaries, you would have had the Provisional IRA who would have policed the area, as well as obviously the guards. But it was still, when you think you have those two things, you have those two organisations, you have paramilitaries, the Republicans who would, you know, make sure that the criminals or the drug dealers were kept accountable, or maybe, you know, they were supporting the vigilante marches. But it was still, regardless, it was still really bad, and it was the whole community was ripped apart because of the drug epidemic, the heroin epidemic, and there was generations lost because of it. Families were destroyed, trauma was multiplied, and generational cycles.
Yeah.
And you can go back to possibly TB, when there was a TB epidemic in the country, to child abuse from the Catholic Church, to drugs. The trauma follows all the way through. But Bali Moon then became this stigmatized community, that it was a horrible, dangerous place to live. When in fact, when you grew up in it, it was quite safe. It was a beautiful community. It had its own magic to it. For example, I'll give you a few of my good experiences in the community. In the summertime, we didn't have a beach, but we had a field. And in the summertime, all the kids you'd have your hot press in the flat. You take your sheet out and you put it on the field, and that was your beach. And there'd be radios, and there'd be groups of youths all the way up along the blocks, and it's just a special place when you think back. That's not there anymore. And the most important thing that Bali Moon had was its community spirit. You could walk 5 steps and you're in your next door neighbour's flat. If your mum was working, your next door neighbour would mind you and make sure they look after you and stuff like that. So all of these little things made the whole community tighter. So when people's perception on the outside was constantly putting it down, the people of Bali Moon became tighter and tighter. So it was a special place to grow up in, although it had its issues, it had its problems. If you lived there, I think the only people that can really judge it is the people that live there. And you have to be honest, good and bad. There's pros and cons to the community.
And Philly wrote a book which I have read. It's called The Choice, and I suppose I'm going to ask him about a few bits that I got out of that book. I suppose the anti-drug message that came from it was the lads coming over the poshy wall, getting the bollocks knocked out and never come back into. But like, we can laugh about that, but that was straight away that you knew the people over the other side of that wall were different than the rest of us. Do you know what I mean? They're different over there, and that you put that bit in the book. You know what I mean? Like, and I remember then you wanted to go to school or college, and people were saying, like, your mates going, "Well, Philly, we don't do that." Like, what the poshy wall and the people over there, what way did that make you feel growing up?
Well, I think it's a good.
And if you can explain about the poshy wall, because
so if I suppose the best way of thinking of it is, I'd ask the question in your own head: where have you seen a wall that separated people, right? So you've seen it in Germany. You have it maybe on the border of America and Mexico. You have it up the north, where you have the religious divide between Catholics and Protestants. Bali Moon had its own wall, separating social class. So you had Bali Moon, as I said, working to lower class community, and then you could throw a stone. That's how close it was to Glasnevin, and there was this big massive wall that separated both communities. And that alone, the kids from Bali Moon I could never understand, why is there a wall separating us? Why does the kids over there speak a little bit different? Why are they a bit posher? Why have they got cars? And we don't have cars. They've got houses, we're in flats. So there was always a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, and a chip on, and to the extent that there was a hill all the way down into that field where it met that wall, and then you had Glasnevin houses. And we used to tee up golf balls and hit it over the wall. That's the only bit of golfing we did in Bali Moon. But the big thing is, we always had a chip on our shoulder. So even to the fact that we used to jump over the wall at Halloween, thinking the kids had better sweets than us, and we used to rob their sweets. So we'd rob their bags of sweets, like thinking that they were going to get better sweets than us, but they weren't getting the same sweets. So we kind of, the kids from Bali Moon, I would say, even now today, would have, they've low expectations of their lives. They have, their standards of their culture is quite low. Their standards of the culture is still take drugs, commit crime, don't go to university. Like the university story that I have in the book, there was a guy who said to me, we're kicking the ball off the tower block in Slough, and he goes, what are you talking about what we're going to do when we're older? And I said, I'm going to go to college. And one of them said, what? And he started laughing at me. I was like, what are you laughing at? And he says, you have to be posh to go to college. You can't go to college. Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
That fella's in Mountjoy prison for murder at the minute now. He's a life sentence to do, and I'm in there now every Tuesday, Thursday trying to help him, doing a leadership program. So it's just crazy that the belief was never there for him, maybe to go on to university, or maybe he just didn't want it, but certainly his opportunity in life was to go on and sell drugs. That gave him this power, and you know, he would have felt that his success barometer in life was to have money and to make people feel a certain way of him because of this power. Ultimately couldn't pay his bills, start taking drugs. His drug dealer gets in the car with him and says to him, where's my money, I'm going to kill you if you don't have it. And he panics and stabs him to death.
Right.
So, but he's doing absolutely amazing in prison at the minute. Brilliant actually athlete. This fellow was playing hurling at a very young age, and he was close to getting on Dublin minor teams and stuff like that. But it just shows, it's just one of those things. Your environment can certainly have an impact on your choices, and it can push you one direction, and for me it pushed me the other direction in terms of sport.
And taking another bit out of Philly's book, The Choice, it's, I suppose, what a great name, what you've just said about your mate and you, do you know what I mean? To make a choice. But one other character that came out at me in the book, and I suppose you don't see this, but I view you as this type of person today, because I've seen the work you do, and it's not on social media. You just mentioned you're into Mountjoy and helping. I've brought a young fella up to you, and you've helped me out in other things. Is a person I see is Paddy Christy. You know, I read that section in the book, and I had to go back and reread it. And I don't know if he knew what he was doing, or he didn't do, or he's just a good guy, or he always done that. But like, for me reading that, it's like even older me, like, the world needs more people like that. Yeah. It needs us to be like that, to have patience, to put a bit of time into people like that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And to help, you know what I mean? And he wasn't looking for anything back, just to nurse now, team along and keep a young fella on the straight and narrow, you know?
Yeah, Paddy Christy, he was a football legend, obviously, in Bali Moon. He was a Dublin captain. But at a very young age in his career, he decided to go back and to try recruit young players to help Bali Moon Kickums, because there was a big age gap between his team and the next ones coming through. So when that happens, the club starts to struggle. And not only that, but he always had a liking of trying to develop, whether it be through coaching kids, through coaching, or whether it be him as a teacher. If there was one job you'd say Paddy Christy or profession to be good at, it'd be one of those, professional coaching or a teacher. And the big thing that Paddy, the best way I can explain it is that he understood the energy of the kids in Bali Moon, and he was very smart in how he coached and mentored the kids. So he would have looked at the kids in Glasnevin, because Bali Moon Kickums, my GA club, is a mixture of two communities, Glasnevin over the Poshy Wall and Bali Moon. Yeah. So the two communities come together to make Bali Moon Kickums. And he understood that having the balance between those two communities could make a really strong culture for the GA team or club. Yeah. And he would go to the local school, my local primary school, and he'd look and he'd go, right, okay, that kid can kick a ball. What's his background? Where is he struggling? Where's his energy? So for me, he would have seen that my brother John was struggling with drugs, and he would have went, right, there's a kid that has this negative energy now I'm going to get him to use that on the football field.
Yes.
And that's why my style is kind of a very aggressive footballer, because I done it from a very young age, and
Yes.
I seen it worked for me, and then that's how I got to success where I am in terms of playing for Dublin. But Paddy Christy has saved so many lives in Bali Moon. He's done so much for Bali Moon Kickham's, done so much for me. You can't really put it in words, to be honest. He's really, really pushed. It goes back to that thing, John, of having one good adult.
Yeah.
Now, my mother and father were brilliant for me. They were brilliant. I wasn't poor.
Yes.
I definitely don't go around trying to sell, the poor story. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I had a good upbringing. My mum, I was spoiled. I was the youngest, but Paddy Christy understood my energy.
Yeah.
And he said, sport is the way for you. So, and when you think about it, he's probably saved, let's say, the guts of 20, 30 lives in my team.
Yeah.
Of lads that haven't went, even lads that maybe didn't get to my level but never went down the road of drugs.
Yes.
They didn't have to play the level I got to, but once they had their good lives in terms of their pathway they've took,
Yeah.
he saved lives. And he's, when you look back and the amount of money he saved the country,
Yeah.
all these lads could have ended up in, child detention centres, could have ended up in prison.
Yeah.
And we know all the time, every time that happens, it costs us huge money.
Yeah. And then I suppose the GAA itself, like the GAA being an organisation, and in years ago I would have had it. My mind is open, so I have some ideas for a few years, and then I go, no, that's actually a load of bollocks. The way you were thinking there, that's actually wrong. This is the right way. So I was involved in sport, and I was mad about the Olympics, and I used to view, my old way of viewing was like the GAA as a cult, and it takes away so many Olympic medals from Ireland, because people like yourself or Kieran Whelan, who would have went to the Olympics in something, do you know what I mean, either boxing with yourself and the GAA takes that from Ireland. But now my opinion is it's a community, and if the GAA doesn't take you, the drug dealing community and the crime community will. Do you know what I mean? Because we like to think everyone's different, but we're not. We need somewhere to belong. So a young fella going through that trauma like you can as easily fit in the GAA or MMA or crime. Do you know what I mean? That gang-based kind of... one is a bit more negative than the other, but they kind of all feed in the same. Do you know what I mean? So my opinion on the GAA, and I've moved down here to Ashbourne, Donamore, and I see they're like... it's such a community within. They don't all have to be superstars. It starts from... they call them the acorns down there, all the little kids, all the way up. And there's jobs, and there's people are doing things and helping. Do you know what I mean? So my opinion on that has completely changed. You know what I mean? And MMA clubs are similar. Do you know what I mean? Not everyone's a superstar. Some people are there just to blow off a bit of steam. Some people are really struggling. Some people, but it's up to them staunch people like Roddy or Dean Scurry, or they can see them people and put a bit of time into them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, I mean, the big thing for me is I would have been very biased towards Bali Moon Kickham's growing up, and I would have been like, join Bali Moon Kickham's, don't join. Now, I played soccer, I done boxing, played hurling. My dad made sure I was in loads of different sports, but I always was biased towards Bali Moon Kickham's because that was my club and go there and blah blah blah. But the big thing for me now, looking back, is that regardless, like all these different clubs or sports clubs in a community, it doesn't really matter once there's kids playing sport.
Yeah.
And if you look at, there's a model called the Icelandic model, and it's basically, there was the crime rates in youths in Iceland was absolutely miles too high there a couple of years ago, and they decided to give kind of a grant to families. If your kid played sport or could play a music instrument, you get welfare for it.
Right.
Right? So the results are unbelievable.
Right.
So that has worked. For me, we need to, as a country, make sport free.
Yeah.
We need to make it free.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go, sport is free. And you're talking about Olympics, you're talking about top sports people in GAA, soccer, MMA, whatever it is, athletics. Unless we do that, right, if we don't do that, how many kids are slipping through the net?
Yeah.
That could potentially be Olympic winners, that could potentially be setting world records, all of these things.
Yeah.
So I got asked by my the secondary school I went to, I got asked by the PE teacher, Philly, there's 2 all-Ireland medal winners in this school, right, from Bali Moon, yourself and my groomsman Davy Bourne. He was best man at my wedding, and he was like, "Used to have all-Ireland medals." Yeah, we kind of struggled to have a GAA team. Can you get any players to come down? And I was like, "You're missing the point here. Like, there's six primary schools in this area.
Yeah.
Buy into getting them more active and healthier, and you have a bigger catchment coming into you."
Yes.
You know? So it's not just specifically looking at the physical profile of a kid and going, "You come here because you know, we'll give you a scholarship to the school and you can play sports." Not. You have 20 kids there that are active, that have good motor development, that have good rhythm, coordination, balance. All these things are the factors, the foundation factors for them to be able to play sport.
Yeah.
So go to the 6 primary schools, do loads of motor development, and get them all active.
Yeah.
Now that's quite difficult as well, because sometimes obviously we don't know what's going on outside of the schools, what's happening in the family home.
Yeah.
But again, this is what happens. It won't solve everything, but you can definitely make things a little bit better.
And I listened to your TED talk. I've listened to it before, but I listened to it again last night, and I'm sure some people are going to go, "Bleeding free, what?" To keep one kid in Oberstown House is 360 grand a year.
300, yeah, 340 to 360, yeah. One.
That will keep an MMA gym and clients for hundreds and hundreds of people, and pay everyone, and pay rent, and pay everything.
But we are waiting. Having a centre like that, like, don't get me wrong, when an under 18 commits crime, really bad crime, they have to be punished.
Yes.
You know, they have to be. It's just take the liberty, rehabilitate them, and then, you know, see what happens after that. But there's so many kids that are going through this process. We know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right, and that comes from back to the point we were chatting about, was the childhood trauma.
Yes.
You know, we're talking about the ACEs yesterday, the adverse childhood experiences. And if you have somebody that's 4+ ACEs, you know, someone that's struggled with drug and alcohol abuse in the family home, domestic violence, domestic abuse, they're likely to go on to commit crime, take drugs, or have a kid at a very young age, have mental health issues. So we know that's happening.
Yes.
We actually know that we as a country can go into Bali Moon and look at, let's say, the 6 primary schools, and look at all of these kids and go, who do you reckon could go down that way?
Yeah.
And we could gather a majority of them. We might miss one or two.
Yeah.
But we can gather them up and say, right, for every euro we spend on them, we save the exchequer €4.
Yes.
Right? So in the UK, for every 250,000 spent on detaining a kid in a child detention centre, it costs 50,000 to keep them out.
Yeah.
Right? So 3 times.
Yeah,
you know? So it's crazy, but it's €1 will save the exchequer €4.
Yeah.
So I just can't get my head around why they have a €22 million running facility in Thames Office. I just can't get my head around. I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know, as you said, like, can we get that money? Can we pump it into communities that have, and it doesn't have to be just working class communities.
Yeah, no.
We need some sort of measurement tool, and I'm working on a project at the minute that I won't really talk about yet because it hasn't been put in the public eye, but we're looking at that.
Yeah. And you spoke about Bali Moon. That can be applied in Tallaght, in Coolock, in Galway, in Cork, because and you spoke about childhood trauma or trauma. That doesn't just go on working class. It goes on middle class, goes on upper class. A couple of years ago, I had to do waivers for something I was doing at the time, and I'm not going to say whether they were males or females, but I had to do these waivers, and these people were aged between the ages of 19 to 24. 90% of them, 90% were on some type of Prozac or Lipitor. I remember going, 19 to 24-year-old, what the fuck is going on? Like,
Yeah.
I was kind of taken aback by it. Do you know what I mean? So, like, I'm not saying don't take medication, but like, there's a lot of trauma out there. You know what I mean? There'll always, like we were speaking about addiction the other day, like, we will always have trauma. We will always have, like, if you look back into our family history, I remember asking me out about our family history, you know, and oh yeah, your man broke his back, he fell in an accident or something, and then you find out that now he's actually an alcoholic and he was locked in work and fell off a ladder. You know, that goes on, but it's not spoken about in families, you know what I mean? But it's trauma, and with that trauma then comes, he's not getting paid anymore, there's no food, and you know what I mean? So I suppose it happens everywhere, but that would be a great idea, that if they could implement something like that through sport, you know what I mean?
Well, if you go in and you impact a community, let's say there's, as I said, the 6 schools, if you've got one kid in each of those schools, right, those 6 kids are the highest risks of becoming the next drug dealers in the community, right? They become the next drug dealers. It's like a mushroom effect. They sell more drugs, families then are destroyed, trauma is created, and it grows and it grows and it grows. So when I was asked by a local social worker, he says to me one day, he says, this is the crack cocaine has hit Bali Moon, we need to do something about it. And I said, what do you want to do? He says, we know the 20 drug dealers in Bali Moon. Me and you will go around to the doors and we'll try get them to use the business of drug dealing legitimately, okay? And I said to him, yes, I'll do that, no problem. But the problem is, when you take them out, the next ones come in.
Yes.
Right? So what we need to do is, we need to look at the grassroots. So that kid that's high risk of potentially being the next drug dealer, we need to show him, first of all, that this is the pathway you need to go, like I did, because this is the pathway ultimately that you can go. And that's my brother John's way. But that basically, if we can, that kid gets asked at a certain age, sell drugs, and he goes, no, that's wrong. And at the minute in Ballymun, it's like there's a huge amount of people that will say selling drugs is wrong. Don't get me wrong. But it's nearly a norm. It's I know he's a drug dealer and you walk by him down the street. If you were in an upper class community and you knew there's a drug dealer living across the road, you'd be like, what's the story? Why is he living there? You know, in Ballymun there's 20 drug dealers. So it's trying to get to the point where we can get kids. The trauma is the biggest issue. The drug addiction is the solution. And we have to try, and it doesn't work, John, unless we look at the policies of the country as well. Right? I'm a big believer that, like, life can be, in this country in Ireland, can be brilliant, you know, if we have a better political will. You know, we don't have, we've struggled to have strong political leadership over years and years. And that trust has been impacted because of that. And unless we have somebody, not just one person, but maybe a political party that can say, do you know what? We were wrong. The people before us were wrong about drug addiction. We have to realise, and we have to be bold enough to say, do you know what? It's a mental health issue. Trauma, drugs, family cycles, generational cycles. We need to stop this. We need to stop incriminating people that are taking drugs, and we need to make sure that we help them and support them. You know, when they changed the law, we changed the stigma and the fear of, oh, there's a drug addict walking down the street, I should be fearful of him. No, hold on a second. Why is he taking drugs?
Yeah.
What's the issue behind it? How can we help?
Yeah. I suppose you touched on the way your brother John, I suppose a lot of people won't, some people won't be sports people. Some sports people looking at this wouldn't have heard your story. How did you become passionate about this, and how during the traumatic event of what happened to your brother, like, tell us a little bit about John, you know what I mean? Who was John?
Yeah, so John was my older brother, 7 years older than me, and at the age of 14 he took his first hit of heroin. Now, we only found out that when I wrote the book, when I spoke to his friend who actually was in the lift shaft when they took the heroin. John wouldn't be an academic in school, would have completely disengaged with school and engage in antisocial behaviour because of that. And as I said, growing up in Bali Moon at that time, heroin was rampant, crime was rampant, and you would have felt that to be safe, either be able to fight or to be able to hang around with an older group of guys that would protect you. And that's what John done. So John hung around with an older group of guys, and they experimented with drugs fairly quickly, and John started experimenting with drugs, and as I said, at the age of 14 took his first hit of heroin. So I was 7 when he took his first hit of heroin. So about 16, and I was probably about 8 or 9, I would have noticed John on drugs, and you would have noticed tin foil in the house and stuff like that in the bedroom. But it was only till he was probably about 17 or 18 that the family really kind of, understood John's problems and addiction. And he would have been a functional addict at the beginning. He would have been working. He would have, he wouldn't have had to steal or anything like that. Unfortunately, he was very tall and thin. He was 6'4", and very thin. And his employer then realised after a while he was missing days, and he was struggling with his job role, and basically they sacked him. Then he started stealing from the home because he has this now habit to feed 30,000 euro a year.
Yeah.
It costs. And he started stealing from the home. I used to save money, used to rob out my piggy bank and stuff like that. And the family just said, like, my mum and dad just said, if we keep you here and you keep stealing, we're feeding your habit, we're killing you. We're ultimately leading you down this road to killing you. So they kicked him out of the house. So he was on the streets for a while, and when you're on the streets, the only way you can feed the habit is stealing from stores, retail stores, wherever you can get your hands on. And that's where the fear comes from, from the general society's perception of drug addicts, especially heroin addicts. So they don't realise that this person, the only thing they cared about was getting this little hit of heroin. Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Their image, their cleanliness, their what people think of them, their all self-worth goes out the window.
Yeah.
And obviously then John would have went to St. Pat's Child Detention Centre in Mountjoy at that time. It's gone now. And when he came back out, that was kind of his initiation. He was kind of like all the older lads he was hanging around with, they'd all went to Mountjoy, and he was like, I'm a partyist now, I've done crime, I've done jail time, so I'm a part of the group now. But what happened then was a few of his friends start to like really get into issues. Like, some of them overdosed. One of his best mates was clean for 2 years while he was locked up, and when he got out, his best mate tried to help him get off drugs, and I used to hang around with John so he wouldn't take drugs. That was my role as a brother. I was embarrassed. I was taught by society to treat John negatively, to be embarrassed by him. It's against the law. Walk by him on the streets.
Yes.
Basically, don't treat him, tough love, don't treat him like a family member.
Yeah.
That's what I was taught, and that's what everybody's taught.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, his best mate, I think he'd fight with his girlfriend and went off and scored a bag of heroin and went home to his father's and took it. It was too strong and he died. So my parents said at that stage, we got to get him out of Bali Moon.
Yeah.
It's the area. So he sent him over to a cousin in London, and it worked. He got clean because ultimately he wanted a change.
Yeah.
Didn't know where to buy drugs, didn't know any other addicts.
Yeah.
So his environment dictated him taking drugs. And then he's tried to start to kind of reintegrate into society over in London, tried to make new mates, tried to get a job, all that stuff that we would kind of take for granted, like, and he couldn't do it because he still looked like an addict.
Yes.
So society pushed him back and said, no, we don't like you. What you look like is against the law.
Yeah.
And it's dirty and it's horrible, so we won't let you in. And he went back on drugs. He went back hanging around with the people that he felt that would respect him, people that he'd met him, let's say in rehab or whatever. And he went back on drugs, and he kind of struggled over the years. He would have came back at Christmas time to see the family, and he would have struggled for a long time between going on that cycle of heroin and methadone. And methadone actually is the legal drug that the government give you. Some people call it FI. And the strange thing about methadone is it's harder to come off methadone than heroin.
Yes.
Right? It's the legal drug the government give you is harder to come off than the one that's on the street.
Yeah.
Right? Which is just crazy. But it works for some people. It makes them functional. It helps them get back into a routine in life. But it's extremely hard to come off. You hallucinate. You know, it's just anybody ask. It's just so hard. So John got to the point where he hit rock bottom. That's the magic. That's the magic potion to go into recovery. You got to hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
Fortunately for heroin addicts, it's nearly like you're nearly on death's door.
Yeah.
There's people I've spoke to that are recovering addicts now, and they've said that they've had 3 or 4 overdoses. Yeah. Like they're dead.
Yeah.
They've died 3 or 4 times, and they still didn't stop taking drugs. Yeah. Right? That's how strong this little substance is. So John, unfortunately, he was 5 days away from going into rehabilitation to come off methadone, and he died from a heart arrhythmia at the age of 31.
Right.
Yeah.
And how you spoke about their society, you know, and I think I grew up in the Ronald Reagan, like we like to think as Ireland as different, but we kind of, instead of the European approach, we take more of an American approach. And we had I remember used to get it in school, the Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan type, drugs will kill you.
The war on drugs.
You know, but drugs won't kill you. And some people actually like taking drugs and they don't kill you. Do you know what I mean? So we just spoke about, with Philly there, about a few bits and pieces. But what we're going to do is we're going to get him back in for a part 2 and do a bit more on this. So like, subscribe, Philly McMahon's Instagram, Philly McMahon, and we're going to talk about a bit more when we get him back in the next time. So that's us on the Straight Talking podcast. Yep.